Sí, cerrada la ruta 68 por peligro de derrumbe en los túneles, es parte de la emergencia vial y de otras situaciones de emergencia también nos sigue reportando Carla Rodríguez. Te escuchamos.
Son imágenes en directo, estamos viendo los funcionarios policiales que se encuentran acá en el sector de Puente Miraflores luego de colisionar contra dos vehículos que se encontraban atrapados en el sector del Puente Miraflores luego que este se derrumbara tras el fuerte temblor, el fuerte sismo que sacudió nuestro país. Se encuentran
is one of several ELF wave transmitters located all over the globe.
Desde las 3 de la
We've seen anywhere in the world since the Sumatra earthquake. Well, the problem with an earthquake this size is that the size of the fault that broke is very large. Probably about 200 kilometers long, and so that means that the damage will be distributed over a very wide area. It's quite a different case from what we saw in Haiti earlier this year, where the earthquake punched very hard in one particular spot, which just unfortunately was very densely populated. Here we're going to have damage distributed over a very wide area, and that's going to be the problem. It's going to be difficult to get to all the places that have been affected. And it means that the shock waves have spread out and some of their energy has been absorbed by the rocks. So the damage anywhere will be less than if it were a very shallow earthquake like the Haiti one. Chile is a developed country. It has very good earthquake engineers. They know what the problem is. But it always comes down to the man on the ground, the actual builder, to make sure that he actually follows the regulations. And that, of course, is going to be something that varies from place to place. So you could know how to protect against earthquakes in theory. Whether the practice on the ground is actually being done properly, that's something that's hard to say. It comes down to the depth, and it's really shallow earthquakes that tend to produce tsunamis. This one down at 30-35 kilometers roundabout, it probably didn't have a big enough impact on the seabed to produce a major tsunami. I've heard that there has been a tsunami observed on the Chilean coast, but it was small. And that probably means that there isn't going to be a large tsunami affecting the other side of the Pacific either. There's going to be more aftershocks, and I've heard that there's been another one that is as large as 7.1, and I think we can expect a lot of aftershocks over the next days and weeks, but they will most likely follow the typical pattern for aftershocks after an earthquake of this type, which is that they will decrease in number and decrease in frequency and also decrease in magnitude.
Is one of several ELF wave transmitters located all over the globe. The United States owns and operates 3 of them, one in Gacona, Alaska, another in Fairbanks, Alaska, and one in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. Russia has one in Vasilursky near Nizhny Novgorod, and the European Union has one near Tromsø in Norway. Working in tandem, these transmitters could potentially alter the weather anywhere in the world, changing the jet stream's course entirely, triggering massive rainstorms or droughts. Even hurricane steering would be possible by heating up the atmosphere and building up high-pressure domes that could deflect or change the course of hurricanes. The U.S. government is firm in its position that H.A.A.R.P is just an atmospheric research facility. But is it more than coincidence that since going online, some experts have reported strange weather anomalies, including massive floods, hurricanes, and earthquakes? H.A.A.R.P went online in 1994, and construction continued until 2007. There are reportedly a total of 5 known ionospheric heaters, including H.A.A.R.P, in the world today. There are possibly 20 other ionospheric heaters in existence all over the world. There is no conclusive proof that any of them are being used as weather weapons, though they do have the ability to manipulate the ionosphere. And that brings us to something else. December 2001. Scientists at NASA's Ames Research Center in Palo Alto, California make a discovery. In studying more than 100 earthquakes with magnitudes of 5.0 or greater, they find that almost all of them are preceded by electrical disturbances in the ionosphere. Could there be a connection to H.A.A.R.P or a facility like it?
To say that H.A.A.R.P can artificially excite the ionosphere in such a way to cause an earthquake, well, it alarms me.
Dr. Agnew experienced the power of ELF waves firsthand back in the 1980s. He was hired by an energy company to locate oil and gas using the same kind of ELF waves at much lower frequencies to carry out his search. It's a process called earth tomography. But during one particular incident, Dr. Agnew believes his use of HAARP-like ELF waves accidentally triggered an earthquake.
It was in the spring of 1987 we arrived in Roseburg, Oregon to use our ELF technology to search for oil and gas. Setting up that day, we had a little bit different results than we expected because the instant that we energized it, there was between a 4 and 4.5 on the Richter scale earthquake that occurred. We were so amazed about what seemed to be cause and effect. We get to an area that has a high propensity for earthquakes, in an area known as the megathrust of the Pacific Northwest. We turn it on, and an earthquake occurs.
Dr. Agnew demonstrates how he may have triggered the quake.
This is a scale model of what the area looked like in Oregon when we scanned for oil and gas in 1987. The strata right here represents the megathrust area underneath the ground. The rock represents the potential energy set up in the ground from a tectonic stress. What we're going to do is introduce ELF waves and demonstrate that it can in fact trigger an earthquake.
In this case, Dr. Agnew was using a stereo speaker to produce the ELF waves needed for his demonstration.
ELF waves, extremely low frequency waves, are just like a subwoofer. In your car, you can actually feel the vibrations through your body. ELF waves are the same way. They vibrate the earth, and at right resonant frequencies, they can have devastating effects.
When the speaker is activated, ELF waves begin to emit. Tiny vibrations in the sand are detected. Then a few seconds later, the rock representing a fault line shifts.
As you can see, in a very few seconds, the resonant frequency built up in our model released the potential energy in the rock. That concussion, on a real scale, would have been felt for 100 miles. These conditions are already set up in the ground. All it takes is the activation energy to make the release happen. This is a small scale, and we're only using 30 watts in this scale.
When HAARP's broadcast array in Gakona, Alaska sends pulses of ELF waves into the ionosphere, the waves get reflected back down and pass through the earth and ocean. If 3.6 million watts of ELF waves were purposely or accidentally aimed at an already unstable fault line, it could, according to Dr. Agnew, cause a tremendous earthquake.
You know, looking at just simple instability, what does it take to create an avalanche? A guy walking across an unstable ice field. What does it take to trigger an earthquake? The right signal coming in when the pressures are already built up and are at their threshold, that feather, in our case that hammer, releases that energy.
Conspiracy theorists believe HAARP is responsible for triggering earthquakes in enemy territories, like Iran, China, and rogue parts of Afghanistan over the past 3 years. But HAARP's startling potential doesn't end there. Some say it's linked to a strange phenomena occurring in our skies. In recent years, peculiar cloud formations have been appearing in the skies all over the world with increasing frequency.
I think most of us in North America have wondered at these plumes crisscrossing the sky in grid patterns, parallel rows, and the now familiar X's. And many of us have wondered what these trails are.
While highly speculative, some researchers suggest these strange cloud formations are another agent of weather warfare. They first appear to be simply contrails, coming from high-flying jet airplanes. But these trails linger in the sky for many hours, some for even an entire day, forming an artificial cloud. Some researchers refer to them as chemtrails.
Chemtrails are deliberately sprayed by high-flying U.S. Air Force tankers, dispersing chemicals into the atmosphere.
Will Thomas has authored a book about chemtrails. Since the late 1990s, he has worked closely with another journalist in investigating these strange patterns that appear in the sky.
We have an FAA representative, in fact, a high government official, a person we came to call Deep Sky, attesting to the truth and the reality behind chemtrails. He described this program of spraying chemical trails at high altitudes in so-called commanded airspace, where commercial flights are routed around and beneath tanker airplanes belonging to the U.S. Air Force.
The theory is that chemtrails are being used in conjunction with H.A.A.R.P. by spraying metal oxides into the air above enemy skies, then directing ELF waves from H.A.A.R.P. to heat those metal oxides. The temperature of the sky is raised to more than 100.